Welcome into the Superdome, joining you live on NewOrleans.Football. Right now, it doesn't look like we are at the Superdome. They are running through their pregame warm-ups as they usually do, but we are here for our pregame live Q&A show presented by Matt Bowers Auto Group. I'm Brooke Kirchhofer alongside Nick Underhill, breaking down Panthers at Saints. This is a 1-11 Panthers team taking on a 5-7 Saints team. Could be bad on bad today, or we could see the Saints break out. But given who we know is out for this game, it is going to be a tall task for Derek Carr, who is exited concussion protocol and will be playing today. Nick, we found out this morning that Taysom Hill is out. Not a big surprise, though, after he did not practice all week, and there's a bit of an issue going on with the foot injury he is dealing with. Rashid Shaheed is not playing, Isaiah Foskey, Kendre Miller, and just housekeeping things here. Malcolm Roach is on IR, Michael Thomas is on IR, and Marshall Lattimore are on IR. A very depleted roster heading into this game.
Big time, yeah, like you said, we didn't expect to see Taysom out here for this one. Derek Carr is playing through a non-dislocated rib fracture, so that's something that he's going to have to deal with. But they're going to have to get really creative in the red zone, and I think that's going to be a huge issue this week. They went 4 for 4 last week down there, but taking out Taysom Hill is going to be a major issue down there. It's going to put a lot more of the onus on Derek Carr. We've seen Carr struggle in that area of the field all throughout the season, so that's something that they're going to have to try to overcome today, and I think it's going to be tough. And then you add in Olave having the flu. Yeah. He's going to play. He should be fine, but that's something that he's going to have to kind of fight through a little bit, and he's going to be less than 100%. So a lot of things working against them today in a game that they absolutely have to win.
Absolutely, and we said this during the week. They're really playing with practice squad wide receivers today. We'll see who steps up. Lynn Bowden Jr. has been asked to do a lot at different points at times in the season. We'll see if he continues to answer the call. A couple other things. We do know that Juwan Johnson is likely going to play. What has he been dealing with in the last few weeks?
Well, I mean, I think he's just kind of been battling just in general, you know, outside of the injury, just kind of battling in general, just a little bit of not being on the same page as Derek Carr, a little bit of ineffectiveness. Hasn't gotten a lot of catchable passes this season. He had one come to him last week, didn't catch it, tipped it up, interception, was a game-changing play for them. But I think just him and Derek just have not been on the same page, and I think for this offense to become what it wants to become, and we're at the point of the season where it's probably not going to become what it wants to become, but to be a little bit better, he needs to be someone that's making plays, and that's maybe been the biggest disappointment of the whole entire season, because he had a great training camp. He was one of the guys that looked most in sync with Derek Carr. People behind the scenes were talking about the connection between those two and how it was a source of excitement, and then the season starts, he has a little injury, and then just nothing ever really got back on track. So they got to get that right for this offense to at least score enough points to win these games down the stretch.
They're going to need Juwan Johnson today, too, with Taysom Hill out along with Rashid Shaheed. As we mentioned, Chris Olave is dealing with the flu. He will play. But on the other side, the Panthers tight end, Hayden Hurst, is out, as well as their starting left defensive end, Deshaun Williams. He is out. Their center, Bradley Bozeman, is questionable. He was a full participant in Friday's practice, but that could be a big issue for their offensive line that has struggled this year. The Panthers have been giving up a ton of sacks. This young quarterback, it's going to be a tough task for him in this game. I'd expect Carl Granderson to maybe rack up a couple of sacks in today's game.
Yeah, it's definitely on Granderson, because I don't know where the pass rush is coming from if it is him, because Cam Jordan's still injured. He's probably going to be on a snap count again. I think he played 16 or 17 last week. I would expect a similar number this week. And the effectiveness of Cam Jordan this season just simply hasn't been there. I mean, he has not had the sack production. He's not what he was a couple of years ago. He got hot down the stretch last year. I doubt we're going to see that again, just given the injury situation with him. So I think there is a lot on Granderson today. He's got to step up in a big way. But rolling back to your last point about Juwan, you're right. They need him today big time, because the one thing the Panthers do is they take away the deep areas of the field. And we looked at that pass chart last time on our last podcast, and there was really nothing deep down the field. Nothing down the middle of the field. You need to fill in the middle of the field, because I don't know that you're going to have the quadrants on the deep areas of the field. So it can't just all be outside the numbers at the sidelines. You got to have some production in the middle. Juwan needs to help fill in that throw chart.
Absolutely, and we know that J.C. Horn is likely going to get more and more snaps in today's game. The Panthers have been ramping him up. He could be a deep threat. We'll see what happens, too, with Chris Olave likely being matched up with J.C. Horn. We'll see how that goes. But these are two teams that are just desperately trying to get a win. The Panthers just have one win this season. Meanwhile, the Saints are trying to end a 3-game losing streak. They're just in a point right now where it's either win or change is likely on the way, which we are going to get to in today's show. We're going to go ahead and get to some of the questions that you guys sent us on social media in this public version of this show for the first 10 to 15 minutes. And then, of course, we will go to our private version on the members only that you can get to that link from our NewOrleans.Football website. That will be at the top of the page. All right, first question. Can we talk about the recovery status of Michael Thomas and Peyton Turner, and whose fault is it in the red zone? Let's go ahead and start with what's going on with Michael Thomas and Peyton Turner.
Yeah, so with Mike Thomas, I think it's a situation where if he does come back and play this year, it'd probably just be for the Atlanta game. And, it's kind of interesting because that could potentially be his last game in a Saints uniform. He's not under contract after this season. And I think if you're Mike Thomas, you got to seriously consider your options and where you best fit with the team. The Saints don't throw slants anymore. They don't hit crossing routes. All the stuff that makes Mike Thomas one of the best receivers in the league are just not part of this offense, and it's not part of what this quarterback does well. So I think if you're Mike, you really got to evaluate your options. Just knowing him, being around him, covered him for his whole entire career. I know he loves New Orleans. I know he understands what the Saints mean to the community. I think that he always wanted to finish his career here, but I think it's a situation where you have to seriously consider that. So we'll see what kind of happens with him, but I think if we see him again, it would just be for the Atlanta game. And, depending on where the season's at and how things are going, it just, it might not happen. But I think health-wise, that's probably the target. Talked to Peyton Turner in the locker room this week. He told me he dislocated 2 of his toes and that he is ahead of schedule. He's running, he's jogging. It's kind of week to week. But it's, when he first got diagnosed with this, they were saying if they made the playoffs, he'd probably be back for the playoffs. So he's doing everything he can to get back out on the field right now. He just doesn't know if it's actually going to be able to happen, but he's fighting the fight. He's trying to get there, and he wants to prove to himself that the stuff he was showing people in training camp is what he can actually do on the field. So it's important to him, just for himself, to kind of do that. So he's doing everything he can, but it's kind of a we'll-see situation. Yeah,
and to be honest, especially with the injuries that he has faced early on in his career, it might not make sense for him to rush back, given they might not even be in the playoffs. We'll see what happens with Peyton Turner. Michael Thomas, though, is somebody we expect to see again. Now, moving into the future, Michael Thomas's future, I think a lot of that will depend on how the season finishes out and also some of the offseason changes that we expect to be on the way as far as the head coach, who will be the OC next year. What moves will the front office make? I think it could be fast-tracked depending on how this game goes today. All right, moving on to the back half of this question. Whose fault has it been in the red zone?
Well, I think it's mostly I put the top of the blame on Derek Carr. That's kind of been what he is throughout his whole entire career, and that's why we see him running the ball so much in that area of the field. They are a good running team in the red zone. I think some of the stuff with passing has been an issue, and that's something that's I don't think is going to get figured out this year. It's something that I think you have to go back to the drawing board this offseason, kind of figure out how to do things to accentuate his positives in that area of the field, kind of eliminate some of the negatives. But, it's just some of the we see the accuracy over the middle of the field, and it's been off the whole entire year. That crossing route a couple weeks ago to Rashid Shaheed that took him to the ground, that was a great example of it. And it's just like that area of the field is just not his forte. So, I think when windows get even tighter in the red zone, it's been a little bit harder. And, I think there's a little bit of speeding yourself up. We see how he reacts to pressure and that. I think in the red zone, some of that happens too. So it's just kind of calming things down a little bit. I think some of the play calling could be a little bit better, obviously, but I would place the onus of the everything there. I think it starts with Carr and then kind of trickles down. You
mentioned just not being able to read the pressure very well. We kind of saw that too in the first quarter of last week's game. Kind of why the Saints were off to such a slow start is Derek Carr kind of felt the pressure, and you saw him just make some bad decisions. Now the one ball to Juwan Johnson. Juwan Johnson should have caught that ball, but A.T. Perry was wide open, and we broke that down this week in our shows that when Derek Carr feels the pressure, he kind of freaks out, and we even heard from his former teammate, the one that had the sack on him that ended up taking him out of the game, that when you get pressure on Carr, when you get to Carr, it rattles him a little bit, and that has absolutely been an issue for Derek Carr with the Panthers starting D end out. Maybe he's got more time today, but the offensive line, credit to them last week, did give Carr, I felt like, enough time to throw. And I think against the Panthers, he's going to get even more time than we saw against a really good Detroit Lions team. The Saints should win this game today, but there are a lot of factors, as we mentioned. Taysom Hill is out, if you guys are just joining in. Rashid Shaheed is not expected to play. That quad injury is more serious than it was expected. Juwan Johnson will be playing, but probably in a limited role. Chris Olave is playing with a flu. Cam Jordan is playing in a limited role. He will be on a snap count dealing with that ankle injury, and a lot of these things will dictate how this game goes, is how limited are these guys. All right, moving on to the next question. If the season ended last Sunday, who would you take with the Saints' first 2 draft picks based on where they are right now?
Who would I take with their first 2 draft picks based on where they are right now? Well, it's tough to put names on it right now, but, I think you have to be looking at quarterback. For me, quarterback would be the top thing, especially if they have a high pick. I think you have to prioritize that because you might not be back in striking distance of that again. And for me, it kind of looks like maybe Derek Carr isn't the long-term answer. Now, granted, he might get back in the system next year and turn it around a little bit, and then that becomes a thing where he is the franchise quarterback. But right now, I don't think I can place that bet on him. And then with the other pick, it's got to be, man. They're in such I think they are in an awful situation long term because their 3 biggest needs are quarterback, left tackle, defensive end. Those are 3 of the 4 most valued positions in the NFL. Cornerback being the other one. I think they're okay at cornerback, but you need 3 of the 4 right now. So with that other pick, it's either left tackle or defensive end, and it's a shame because they've drafted those guys over and over and over. And Trevor Penning not being out there in his jumbo package. At this point, I don't like using the word, but it's looking like they missed on that pick big time. It's 2 years of no production now.
And we actually have a question in our members-only stack of questions that we will get to in about 5 minutes here, where it will just be on a private link on NewOrleans.Football. You guys will have to go to our website to find that private YouTube link. But somebody did ask, look, based on the guys that are going to be free agents in 2024, which ones are you picking up? I've got a few names on this. Couple D linemen, and I've also got a cornerback on my list. But sticking with the public questions before we get to the private chat, has there been a pattern to why the run defense has regressed so much?
Yeah, I think the pattern is it's really players underperforming, and then they're coming out in these games early in the games, and teams are hitting them with runs, that are a little bit outside of what they typically do, but they're setting up the defense with those in the first 15 plays, and then by the time the team reacts, the damage is already done, and they've given up a big play, or there's something there. So it's been an issue overall. So I think it's underperforming players, and then just kind of some of the scouting early in games, I think it's been off. And we've heard that from players on the record, off the record. It's something that has been a big issue for the team this year. Yeah, a lot of chatter off the record. Maybe we will get to that one day soon. Heading to this next question, how do the 2021 to 2023 Saints compare to the 2014 to 2016 Saints that went 7-9 for 3 straight years? Yeah, this is a great question, and I don't think they compare at all. They blew it up after 14, kind of, and that was the most aggressive rebuild that we kind of saw there in that span, and they managed to win 7 games because Drew Brees is an incredible player. And I think in the retelling of his career, and when there's a little bit more distance from this, and I think we've seen it live in the moment, but I think when there's even a little more distance to this, there is a serious conversation to be had about how much they wasted the prime of his career, and those seasons were indicative of it. They came into 14 though thinking they were a Super Bowl team, and they just collapsed big time. So that was a thing that they kind of got to, it's different. It's completely different because this team is supposed to be competing. They're supposed to be going for the playoffs and all that, and they just stink. They are not coached well enough. The quarterback isn't playing well enough. They're just underachieving significantly, and I think those teams, 14 underachieved, 15 and 16, I think drastically overachieved. The fact that they won 7 games with some of those teams, absolutely shocking. And then you saw how the 2017 draft class benefited the team, and to be honest, is still benefiting the team. A lot of those guys still on the roster, some of them not healthy, Marshawn Lattimore being one of those. All right. In the final days on some of them, too. I know. All right. Speaking of quarterbacks and speaking of draft and trade rumors and things like that, somebody asked, has there been any smoke to the Justin Fields trade rumors? No, I don't think so. I think that, I don't know that Fields would be the guy that would be my immediate answer for this team either. I mean, I don't know that they're creative enough to kind of figure that out. And the fact that, Fields is a very exciting player, but, I don't know that he's going to be the guy that kind of carries you out of this. I think a player like that needs, a lot of support. You need, an elite offensive line. You need great weapons. You need to kind of build the structure around him. And I don't know that the Saints are going to be able to do that. So I would look a different direction. I wouldn't want a quarterback that I have to pay that plays kind of that. So, if you got Jaden Daniels, I think you could build around him and kind of accentuate some of the stuff that he does well, building the structure. Or, if Taysom Hill was your starter, on a cheap contract, you could build around him, build the offense around him. But, having a Justin Fields who's going to need a new contract, and then he's high paid, and then you can't pay everybody else, I think you're in a tough situation.
I feel like he's still unproven. I remember covering him back when he was at Georgia before he transferred, and he's just one of those guys that you don't necessarily know what you're going to get, which to me is you took a gamble on Derek Carr this offseason. It has not paid off. I don't expect it to pay off next year. Now, it does depend on an offensive coordinator that could come in and change things around, but we just haven't seen enough from Derek Carr to really say, all right, this was a great great pickup. $150 million is a lot of money, and it's putting the Saints in a tight spot, which is why we continue to say he's not going anywhere. He will be here next year.
Yeah, really, when you break it down, it's like a $260-some million deal. But, the first 2 years, there's no getting out of it. He's here next year. So I'd be fine, though, with bringing in another quarterback and then let him compete. And if the young guy wins, he wins. If Derek wins, you play him for another year and you let the young guy sit. Patrick Mahomes sat for a year behind Alex Smith, and it benefited him. That used to be a thing teams did. You could be in that situation and do it, but I think you need the right coaching. You need someone that can develop him, the young guy, all that stuff. So my door is definitely open, though, to bringing in another quarterback.
All right, last public question, then we will go to the private chat. Any chance they have Alvin Kamara run some of Taysom's plays from the gun today?
It's a good question. I mean, you could do some wildcat. We've seen it before. It was something like last year or a couple of years ago that was supposed to end up being a big part of the offense. It never was. They have these plays, so it's something that I think they could definitely try to do. And they could be smart, especially in the red zone. I could see some of that for sure.
All right, let's get to the members-only private link. Guys, if you are not a member, Nick will tell you how you can sign up right now and continue joining us on our live pregame show.
NewOrleans.Football /subscribe. Use the code NOF, 20% off your first payment. Get on there. We got a lot of stuff, and if this season starts getting dramatic, you're definitely going to want to be signed up for the site. There's some stuff that's going to have to be talked about soon, so now's a good time to sign up and be locked in for all the drama that is
that will
possibly
unfold.
Coming.
It will unfold.
At some point.
Yes.
At some point, yeah.
And you're going to want to be locked in with some of the information that we have been told that will likely come out soon. So, all right, let's get to our first members-only question. I don't understand how not using Trevor Penning in any situation, even in the jumbo package, is effective for the Saints, who needed to